All right, welcome to Inside My Canoe Head, a podcast about individual emergency preparedness, policy-related issues, adventure, life, seeking the brilliance of happiness. Sit back and enjoy. All right, everyone, thanks a lot for joining us again this week on the podcast. This week, I think it's really important that we talk about something basic and return to the simplistic part of individual emergency preparedness, but arguably the most important element of life, which is water. Yeah, I know, it sounds simple. Just get water, store water, you're good to go. Don't worry about it, walk away. Well, it's actually a little bit more complex than that. It's far more involved than that. So sit back, grab a beverage, maybe some water, and let's get at it. So the first thing we're going to ask is, of course, the most important question in individual emergency preparedness is, who is responsible for your outcomes? And the answer to that is you. It's not the government who's going to come rescue you. It might be your neighbors and community, but that's based upon you building those relationships. Your preparedness level is based upon your efforts, your dedication, and your focus. And it all starts with your accepting responsibility for your outcomes. You're not going to adopt the victim mentality and that things happen to you and woe is me and whine and complain, but you're willing to take on total responsibility. So with that, we're going to talk about water. Now, why water? Well, we've all talked about the rules of threes in individual emergency preparedness. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. And those are general ideas to get us thinking about what are the most important things that we need to consider. But water is a function of life. You're 60, 70%, something like that, made up of water. Getting enough water and hydration is a function and allows all of the rest of your body facilities to run properly. Your body can run for a considerable period of time without any caloric intake by using stored fat cells as energy. However, it can't create water. And so because of that, water is so incredibly important. Now, you're going to say, I got this, water's perfectly fine. So just sit back and hear me out. I promise you this will be worth it. How much do you need to have in your house? Well, when we talk about individual emergency preparedness on this podcast, we talk about you. After you're going to accept the responsibility, you define the size and breadth and scope of the family for which you want to be responsible. And then you're going to turn and determine what your time horizon is. Your time horizon, your timeline, however you want to phrase that. The basic question to ask yourself is, how long do I want to be able to stay in my residence if all the public utilities are turned off and still be perfectly able to provide for my family, myself, and all of my responsibilities? I have a 90-day rule. That's what I work towards every day, and I try to make sure that I'm at the 90-day level for everything. So with water, I'm looking for 90 days. So how much do I need? So each individual person to be healthy on the average exertion and the average temperature, the average human being, and I know it's all averages, but that's generally what we gear it around, you're going to need 2 liters per person per day. Let's just say per human. So even a baby, infant, etc. And that is for human ingestion and human bodily operations. When we talk about adding water for cleaning, because ablutions are very, very important in any type of survival or preparedness situation. If you're not clean, you invite bacteria and a whole bunch of other things that can cause significant issues for you and your family. And then you probably want some water to cook some food, beans, rice, Mountain House, whatever it is that your food supply is encompassing, you're probably going to need water for that. So the general survivalistic rule is about 4 liters or 1 gallon of water per person per day. So if I have a family of 4, I need 16 liters a day. If I do that math, that's 1,440 liters of water. I don't store that, okay? And later, and when at the very end of this podcast, we'll get into the element on storage, and I'll talk to you about how I cover off 1,400 liters of water without actually having it. So today we're going to go through the contaminants, the threats and contaminants to water supply, purification options, and then storage that may fit what you're looking for. So the first thing is, what are the threats we have to our current water supply? So the vast majority of the listeners to this podcast live in an urban or suburban environment, or even those that live slightly rural, I'll call them. You're on well and septic. In other words, you're not in a position now where you currently collect rainwater or you go dip it in the river. And even if you do, a lot of this will be applicable. So your threats to your water supply, number one, in an urban environment, are storm sewage overflow. And that means when you have a surge of water that overflows it gets too big for your storm sewers and your regular sewage supplies, that it can back up sewage into the water supply. This can happen when you have an overrun on a farmer's field into a water supply. You basically, for some unforeseen event, you have the contamination of the human water supply by sewage through natural, unfortunate events. You then have intentional contamination, which is rare, but it is one of the biggest global threats to a modern society. If I want to destabilize a city of 1 million people, I'm not going to try some crazy attack on a building or anything like that. I'm going to contaminate the water supply, right? So I'm going to intentionally contaminate the water supply in a major city to the extent to which the city and the municipality will be forced to shut off that water supply for a significant period of time, where they try to find the fault, clean up the fault, restart the system, flush the system. And during all of that, they've got to figure out a way to get potable water to well over 1 million people every day. And that's not going to happen, because there is no city in North America who has that plan. So it's very easy to bring a city to its knees by removing its access to the water supply system. Even, I would argue, more so than the power system, that one of the greatest vulnerabilities of urban environments is contamination to the water supply. So when we talk about contaminations, there are 4 major groups of contaminations. So this comes from the US EPA, and the number one is physical. So these are your sediment and your organic material that floats into it. Now, a lot of times, in and of itself, it's not going to cause significant harm to humans unless you have an increase trace mineral levels, etc., which is more flowing the second part, which is chemical contamination. That could be nitrogen, it could be bleach, it could be pesticides, it could be naturally occurring metals and minerals at an exceptionally high concentration. Now, a lot of times what happens in rural environments is you have runoff that comes from the farmers' fields, for example. So you have large-scale industrial farming, especially hog farming or concentrated beef farming, where you have these tailing ponds that are full of waste from animals, and they're supposed to be naturally dealt with, but runoff from these fields can get into natural waterways, and you start having animal sewage contamination with waterways, and that gets to a big deal. And in the farmers' fields, you have the issue with pesticides. So a lot of pesticides and herbicides that are used by farmers to kill weeds and to kill pests that interfere with the crop growing, and exceptionally strong levels of fertilizers to make sure the zombie ground, as we call it, continues to produce corn year in, year out, even though that's counter to everything that nature is about. But all of that gets run off of the fields in heavy rains, spring floods, fall heavy rains, that type of thing, and it gets into the water supply. The third type of contamination is biological. So this is your bacteria, your viruses, your protozoa. Some of the most common ones that we deal with in backpacking and outdoor work is Giardia and Cryptosporidium. These are both bacterias and parasites that live in the water that can cause significant diarrhea and harm to human beings. And if diarrhea is not properly treated, it can lead to some significant issues related to dysentery, diarrhea, like I said, typhoid, cholera. And believe it or not, in this world, according to the United Nations, about 480,000 people die every year in this world due to contaminated water. So this is no joke. Contaminated water will kill, especially in a situation where you are not in the position to properly treat it. And the fourth one is what's actually been quite topical lately, is radiological contamination through cesium, plutonium, or uranium. So this is the detonation of a nuclear device or the leaking of a nuclear radiation out of a power plant causes these naturally occurring elements to contaminate the water and then makes it unfit for humans to drink. So these are your basic four contaminations. You can have physical, chemical, biological, and radiological. We're going to part the radiological to the side because I think we've had enough conversations on this podcast and elsewhere in the world about nuclear detonations and nuclear disasters. So let's talk about physical, chemical, and biological, which a lot of times you can have all three of them at the same time in your water supply, especially if you're dealing with an alternate water supply. So if we look at that and we say, okay, I've got potable water coming through my tap from the city or from my well. I have it tested regularly. I have water softener, water purification in my home. I should be okay. And you're right. You are. The water supply in a major urban center in the Western world is safe to drink. You may argue whether fluoride should be in it. You may argue whether the right amount of chlorine is in it and all this other trace minerals that may or may not be present in the potable water, but it is deemed safe for human consumption by a whole bunch of engineers with a whole bunch more training than both you and I have. The potable water system works. What I'm talking about is when the potable water system is no longer available to you for whatever reason. So put yourself in that position. How do you purify water? How do you take water that is somewhat contaminated with one of those three elements, and how do you change it into potable water, right? So the first one is, if we deal with physical contamination, it's to strain it. Now, you can use micron filters that you will get in something like a Catadine pump filter. Reverse osmosis that you hear about that you can get from water supply stores is the same thing. So reverse osmosis is the process of pushing water through at high rates of pressure through very, very fine filters to remove all the physical contaminants. Now, reverse osmosis will pretty much take absolutely everything out of the water. So it is really almost perfect to drink, pretty much perfect to drink. That's like your Catadine pump filter that you use when you camp, when you do various other things, or if you have the reverse osmosis set up in your house. So that's the number one thing to deal with actually all of these, other than radiological, is that you're going to use a reverse osmosis type filter. The problem with that is that they require regular cleaning with potable water. They have a limitation on the amount that you can use, and for a lot of times they're inefficient. If you're talking about taking the time to purify 20 liters of water a day for a family of 5 or 6 people, that can overwhelm a Catadine system pretty easy. We have gravity-fed systems that use microfilters, so Platypus and other systems like that, where you fill a 4 or 8 liter bag of water and you hang it vertically and there is a filter. So you use the pressure that's put on it is through gravity and it opens up into a clean bag. Those type of filters work well. Sawyer Squeeze, Mini Squeeze are another examples at the small time. And Life Straw, which is what most of us have in our emergency preparedness mobile kit, is that you can just basically stick it in a puddle full of motor oil and water, and you can drink through it and you'll get potable water out the other hand. So look up a Life Straw. It's great for an individual on the move, but that's number one. The second one you can use is a filter. So I look at the simplistic option, so I always like to talk about those first. Cheesecloth. So cheesecloth, double layered cheesecloth, is basically going to get rid of the vast majority of physical sediments in it. Now, it's not small enough microns. 0.1 microns is a general idea that you're turning for. It's not going to reduce the chemical and the biological, but it will get the physical. So if I'm taking a bucket of dirty water and I'm pouring it into a clean container, I'm going to cover the opening in that clean container with a couple layers of cheesecloth, and that'll get out the large scale sediments, etc. So once that I've got the major physical sediments removed, I've now got to consider, how do I deal with chemical or biological? So you can't see the bacteria, you can't see the viruses, and you can't see protozoa, right? Or nitrogen or pesticides or trace metals or anything in there. All that you can do in that case is you have to come at it from the assumption that the water you're dealing with right now is contaminated with one or all of those elements and will require some type of treatment. Now, there's 3 principal treatments I want to talk about. Number 1 is boiling it. Now, boiling water for 5 minutes or just bringing it to the boiling point will kill any organism within bacteria, virus, whatever it is inside the water will be killed when you take the water to the boiling point. Some people say to give it a rolling boil, a really strong boil, whatever the heck that means, for 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, if that makes you feel better, that's fine. Reaching the temperature is really all that's required. So it kills anything. Now, it won't get rid of trace metals that are in the water. Really, only way to get rid of those trace metals is your reverse osmosis filtration system. But other than that, boiling the water will do it. Now, the issue with boiling water as your plan for purification is you have to have fuel. So whether you're using a portable gas stove or whether you're building a fire or however you're using it, you're going to have to now consider fuel, pots, etc., and the time involved to do all of that, to do filtration. So remember, everything that you add to your preparedness plan for dealing with purification of water, if it's asking for time and resources, then the opportunity cost has to be considered, because if you're going to burn, you now have to you have to find wood, you have to process and cut wood to the appropriate, you have to have the fire starters and the skills necessary, and then you have to have the time to build the fire to a point where it's hot enough to boil water. If you can see all of that time that you're doing the preparations to boil the water, you can't be doing something else. That's the opportunity cost. So that in Canada where I live next to the boreal forest. I will never, ever for the rest of my life, and neither will every human being in North America, ever run out of sufficient wood to burn. We live in the boreal forest. We're good to that. The real consideration is the time necessary to process that. The second way to do it is to do some commercial off-the-shelf purification tablet. Now, I've used Aquatabs or Aquafina water drops for all of my backpacking, and I do that because of the simplicity. I use 1 liter Nalgene bottles just because they're heavier, but they're more durable. I use the wide mouth because I've got fat lips. Ha ha ha. But the point is, I use a 1 liter Nalgene, and I have the Aquatabs that drop into it for my purification. It's just easier to use it that way. It's simple. You drop 1 tablet into 1 liter, you wait 30 minutes, your water is safe to drink. If it's really, really cloudy and really, really challenging water, let's just call it that, then you're going to add a second tab and you're going to wait 30 minutes. There's higher power tablets that guarantee to kill every single virus and bacteria. They take 4 hours to work. And then you also have the ability to put it in a clear glass jar and put it in the sun. UV will kill it in 8 hours, guaranteed. It'll kill every living thing in there through UV if you have direct sunlight. So those options are there. Commercial off the shelf, there's UV pens that you can stick into the water that only take a couple of seconds to kill everything in the water. So there's a lot of commercial off the shelf products. The problem with commercial off the shelf products is they have a lifespan that's sometimes no longer than a year or two. And if you're going to drink a lot of water, which you should be, you're going to need a lot of tablets. So for example, I have 2 sets of tablets. I have one for my 1 liter on the go, and I have Aquatab sells a different tablet. You got to make sure you're using the right one. That's for 20 liter jerry can containers or 20 liter containers. So I have those to fill when I fill my jerry cans, I throw one of those in, leave it for 4 hours. It's perfectly good to go and fine for human consumption. So that is your commercial off the shelf. You've got your gravity filters, you've got your reverse osmosis, your Catadine, drinking straw type filters. And then you've got your commercial off the shelf tablets or those type of Aquafina. Mix the 2 drops together, let it sit for 5 minutes, add it to the water, you're good to go. Those are great. The number one solution that I think is most important for all of this is pool shock. Now, I know that sounds a little weird, but hear me out. So some people use bleach for their intent. 2 droplets of household bleach, as long as it's household without contaminants and fresheners and all that other stuff. Just straight household bleach, 2 droplets in 1 liter will purify it. Yes, okay, but bleach has a time and a lifespan, right? And it's also a very caustic and dangerous chemical to have sitting around if you have pets, children, etc. And the amount that you need to keep, again, is another mobility or potential storage issue. So pool shock is actually calcium hypochlorite. Calcium hypochlorite comes in a granular form. It comes in big pucks that you can throw in your pool, but we're looking for the granular form. It is super cheap, and the reason being it is shelf stable for a considerable number of years. And basically what calcium hypochlorite powder granules allows you to do, something like a teaspoon of it will make 2 liters of bleach. And then you use the bleach to purify the water. So literally a Nalgene, 1 liter Nalgene bottle jar of hypochlorite can, when turned into bleach and then used in water, can create tens of thousands of liters of potable water from a storage system that is no bigger than a shelf-stable bottle of Nalgene. So if you just think that size, the portability, the lightweight of it, using calcium hypochlorite is the best way to ensure that you're going to kill everything that could hurt or kill you in the water by giving you the ability to make bleach and then using that chemical bleach to then put into your water to purify it. It is by far, from a minimalist perspective, from a mobility perspective, you literally need a couple containers for water, a container for bleach, and a thing of calcium hypochlorite. And you're literally, I'm 51 years old. 1 thing of calcium hypochlorite will be good enough for my lifespan to produce enough water for me to use. So when you think about the fact that 1 puck can be thrown into a massive swimming pool and completely turn it crystal blue from green water and make it not quite drinkable, but you know what I mean, where you could get into it and still it's probably pretty strong on your eyes. So dial that down and you look at it. Calcium hypochlorite is the number 1 Prepper recommended long-term water storage. Like, I wouldn't do this on a regular basis for your household water. This is the type of thing where you can literally take a 1-gallon empty water jar or a considerably strong jar to make the bleach in, a calcium hypochlorite, a couple of little droplet thingies to put droplets in water, and a teaspoon, put it on your shelf, and you're now good for 10,000, 20,000 liters of potable water. That's the simplicity idea that I like. And so when we talk about storage of water, so I told you in the beginning that I needed 1,440 liters of water. I store 300 in my house, about 300 to 400. That's it. So I only store a third of what I need. Now I store most of it in 20-liter Spectre jerry cans, military grade. And the reason I say that is because my 28 years in the military has taught me these jerry cans are $30 each, but I have personally thrown them off the back of a moving deuce and a half. For those of you who know what that is, they bounce around. You can beat the living snot out of them, and there's literally no damage to them. They are built to last, which means they will survive the apocalypse and anything else. So I have a number of those that every 6 months I rotate it because they're BPA free. They don't leach chemicals back into the water and therefore they're safe. But every 6 months I just keep rotating the water. And then I have, the storage tank of potable water that is sitting in my hot water tank because I have the old school hot water tank. And I have a little bit of bottled water. But where I get most of my longer term is rain barreling, because I live in Ottawa. We get tons of rainstorms. We can go like 5, 10, 15 days in the summertime without any rain. But when we get rain, we get massive amounts of rain. So I literally just take off part of the part of the drain pipe, and I fill a rain barrel with it. And a rain barrel can very quickly fill up, 200 liters of water in a rain barrel, and you sit it there, right? And so basically this is untreated water from the sky, which means but it's ran off your roof. Who knows what's in it? Again, I treat it as all water. I treat as if it's contaminated unless it comes from my tap and I know a potable source. So I treat it as contaminated, but in about 15 minutes in a good rainstorm here in Ottawa, I can get 200 liters off my roof. So that's how I augment it, because it's just, I live in a townhouse. I don't have the ability to store 5 years of food. And well, I could, but I actually want to live in my house, not turn it into a bunker. So I keep enough water, and I know I have the ability over the period of time that my water will sustain myself to generate more water from the sky, because it does rain here. Secondary, I have, and this is part of water storage as well, I have found a secondary source of water from my house. So within a 10-minute walk of my house, there is a small pond where I can draw water from if necessary. So I just took a walk around my neighborhood just to identify it. Didn't cost me anything. I like to go for walks anyhow. So I found the secondary source, so I know where, if those first two sources dry up, I have a secondary source that I can take a jerry can, dip it in, fill water, bring it home, strain it, purify it, treat it, and then use it and drink it. So storage is really what works for you and the type of house that you're in. I use the Spectre jerry cans just because I know and I can count on their durability. There is nothing wrong other than contaminant pollutants with your 500 ml bottles. I would always recommend getting a bottle that matches your water purification. So if you're using Aquatabs or Aquafina drops that are designed for their mix for 1 liter, then make sure that your water storage system matches that, right? So that you can take an Aquatab and drop it into a 1 liter container of water and you're good to go. If you buy the 500 mils, those tablets are too small. You can't break them in half. And if you have a 1.5 liter, then the 1 liter tablet may not be enough and the two tablets may be too much. So simplify your life, whether you use Nalgene or you use the 1 liter. So if you're going to buy commercial off-the-shelf water, have it in liter formats. Like a 4 liter is fine. The gallon bottle is fine because you can put 4 tablets in it. But don't make your life unnecessarily complicated by not matching everything up. Make sure it's a system that works well together, and everything will be fluid. If you use a 20 liter Scepter jerry can like I do, buy the Aquatabs for 20 liters. It's easier than putting 20 tablets in it. Now, 20 tablets will work. I'm just suggesting to you that there's a simplistic and easy. Don't make your life more complicated than it needs to be. Water storage just needs, I flip it every 6 months. So if you're using these 1 liter bottles from the store that you buy, the disposable ones, just make sure you're using them and you're constantly flowing it through, and that whatever your storage supply gets consumed every 6 months and you're good to go. Why 6 months? There's lots of studies out there about chemicals leaching into the water, how long the water stays, how it's stored, but no studies say water less than 6 months becomes unsafe. That's why I picked 6 months. There's arguments after that, whether it's good for 6 months, whether it's good for a year, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, all kinds of study, all kinds of disagreement. I go with what I know is true, that at 6 months, my water is still good to go, and I'm going to replace it, so my water will always be good. So thank you very much. Hopefully this week we got to talk about water and not other bad things that are happening. Look at your water game, up your water game, get it going. Think about first what you need, how long, how much you need it, how you would like to store it. Then think about how you would like to purify it, and make sure you have that entire chain done. I always recommend simplicity. Having a gravity-fed system, having a tablet-based system, something that takes very, very little effort on your part. Because let me be serious. If we're in a situation where you're having to build a fire to boil water in your backyard in -30 in February, you'll be asking yourself, why didn't I listen to that guide inside my canoe head and buy a gravity filter or some tablets? You can do it inside the house, far easier. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us here. Stay tuned. The YouTube channel is coming. We're going to add a couple of more episodes in the coming weeks. We are going live soon. That reminder will be up on the YouTube channel, so you can click on it and have a reminder there for the live stream that will be starting on the 28th of April at 1900 hours Ottawa time. This is where we're going to give you the details of what we're doing at Inside My Canoe Head, what the future's going to look like. We're hopefully going to have 1 or 2 guests who are going to pop in and join us. We're going to have some prizes to give away. We're just going to have a good time and say, hi, here I am. We're back at the world. We're going to try to make a go of this. So thank you very much for everything. Go visit our new website. InsideMyCanoehead.ca is up. There's work. I get it. There's lots of work to do. Fair enough. But all of these things start out with your website. It's there. Go have a look at it. Throw me some comments. There's an ability to press a button there to send me an email. Sign up for a newsletter, which is going to be starting next Tuesday. We're going to be sending it out, emergency preparedness newsletters on top of that. So we're starting to build this profile. We're starting to build Inside My Canoe Head. Join us on this journey. And if you like what you hear, there's a little button there. Go buy me a coffee. I am fueled by nothing better than awesome, incredible black coffee. So thank you very much. Take care of yourself. We're almost out of this COVID-19 thing. The masking, all the rules are coming down. But remember, take care of yourself. Do what makes sense for you and your family and your safety. Until next time, take care. Stay safe.